Here we are, reverse redacting one more time. You never know. It could always be the last time. And I am joined. So Ford Suze is on assignment, and I am joined by a regular now, Jared Putnam, and also our good friend who's joined us once before for the WWE discussion, Stephen Sandridge. How you doing?
Hi, everybody. I'll be playing the role of substitute Ford today.
I did that too initially too. I always said that I don't know if you're a Dukes of Hazzard fan, Stephen, but this was kind of lost on Judah and Ford. But I always told them that I was like the Vance and Coy Duke of of the show. You know, just like replacing.
Oh yeah,
at some point. You know,
the cousin Oliver of the Brady Bunch.
There you go. There you go.
The Pam of the Cosby Show, if you will.
The Pam of the. See, you guys have lost me.
Typically, one of those situations where cast members leave a show and then they're replaced with maybe a less popular version.
Right, just a generic version. Yeah,
they don't really do that anymore in shows, right? People commit.
Maybe Nikki and Paulo from Lost, would that be the same situation? They weren't really replacing them.
No, they weren't. I don't know. I would have to think if there's a if there's really like a modern day. I don't watch as much TV as I used to too, so I don't know, but I can't think of a modern day equivalent.
Me either.
Okay, well, we are going to be talking about Meet the Robinsons. This is something that came up pretty much from you, Jared, as you started using Keep Moving Forward as our outro.
Yeah, I randomly just threw that in one day. So,
and this is a movie that my family comes back to often. I know that a fellow friend, acquaintance of ours, Marilee, has talked about this as far as like in terms of adoption,
right,
and being one of the good movies for that. When I originally saw it, so it's a cartoon. It has, I don't know, does it have any major actors in it?
Tom Selleck.
Tom Selleck is in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's kind of a running gag about him.
Yeah.
Oh, well, we'll talk about that. The director, Stephen J. Anderson, he has done another one of my favorites. He was the director for what was it? I know it was another cartoon. Oh yeah, it was how The Emperor's New Groove. And he has a good way of, it seems to me. Oh, he also did Tarzan. He was a writer on Tarzan. Oh, he was just miscellaneous crew on. I thought he was more on Emperor's New Groove. He was just miscellaneous crew. So I guess he had no.
Interesting. He upgraded for Meet the Robinsons.
Yeah.
He also did. He was a director on Winnie the Pooh. But he captures sensitive, complex subjects of family and friendship in this show, while still keeping up a air of adventure and fun, I would say. But I want to hear from you guys, Stephen. Well, first, Jared, you brought this up. You were saying it was something that you'd like to talk to. What was the impetus behind that?
I think it's just, it's like a movie that, well, I guess most all your favorite movies are things that resonate with you personally. I guess that's not necessarily true. You can have just a mindless action flick that you like, but just the story and the message of it was something that resonated with me personally, just from the standpoint of, I guess, kind of being able to put myself in Lewis's shoes in a lot of ways of not having the best family growing up, and kind of always, sort of yearning for, I wasn't in an orphanage or anything like that, but sort of, wishing for a better family situation. And the overall message then kind of goes to, well, I guess we'll get into some of that later, but just the overall message of what he ends up learning in that story is just kind of a message of hope that you're the circumstances of the family or lack of family or whatever that you're born into don't have to be everlasting and don't have to define who you are, and you can't let that color your outlook on life.
And not just family, right? Circumstances in general.
Right.
Okay. Oh, before we go to you, Stephen, I forgot the simultaneous sigh. So if we can, it's got to be part of it's a new part of our thing here. I don't know if you know this, Stephen, but we do the simultaneous sigh during the podcast, where we call upon the nutrients, not nutrients, or the stuff that we need so much in the air, and we take a giant heave of carbon monoxide. No, whatever. We take a giant sigh together, and it's the simultaneousness that sometimes can trigger a good feeling. So let's blow everything out and together take a simultaneous sigh.
Feels good.
Feels good. Thanks, guys.
Oxygen feels good.
Well, I don't know how much oxygen is really in here.
I might have brought in more dog hair than oxygen, but it's okay.
Okay. So yeah, the feeling, the message of hope and being able to transcend your circumstances. Stephen, this is one of your favorites?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, you two may know about this about me from knowing me over the years, but I tend to have this sort of Abed from Community quality of translating a lot of things through pop culture and film and music and stuff like that. And that movie was a really landmark moment in my life. It's just that time of my life. My wife, we weren't married yet, but we were dating at the time, and we actually took the song from that movie as our first dance at our wedding. "Little Wonders" by Rob Thomas.
It's one of my all-time favorites. Yeah, one of like probably top 5 all time for me.
And it's a beautiful song, and just really captures the spirit of that film, and I think kind of our relationship too. Like, I wasn't. I mean, I had a good family experience growing up, but had endured some tragedy after we left Toccoa with my parents, and still got my mom, but lost my dad after that, and finding yourself in kind of a weird place, and so in a couple of years after that happened, Allison and I were dating, and then we went to go see this because I like to go to the movies, and we both love Disney films anyways. And it was just a real sleeper good film, even apart from the Disney brand of it. And I think just there's something about finding your people. I think in films, and even when those people aren't really tied that closely to you in the beginning, there are bonds sometimes that are closer than blood with people, and in a sense that sometimes that can be a more stark definition of family than where you started. And so seeing that play out, and a lot of what Jared already said, just about hope and not being really defined by your circumstances, and just being able to, I'll save some of this for later, but this sort of reinforced notion of, and I'll give Ford credit because he actually introduced me to this idea in another film, relaying it to the sort of theological idea of the already but not yet. When you have this notion of fulfillment or redemption in your future, knowing that that's coming to reinforce your ability to persevere in the present.
Yeah. And I think that's what I like most about the movie is the cleverness of the writing to where it's a complicated storyline. There's a lot of ins and outs. And yet it doesn't get too convoluted. It keeps it light and it keeps it sentimental. It keeps it, not sentimental necessarily, but I guess it is kind of sentimental, but it keeps you engaged with humor and you get to know this family, although there's some really weird things about this family. It's quirky. It's a very quirky movie.
Yeah.
From dancing frogs to I'm not really quite sure where the attraction, like there's some weird attractions and romance, stuff that maybe you guys need to explain to me. But there is it's not a normal movie, which I really appreciated. I think a lot of people didn't see it or didn't like it because it didn't really follow the cookie cutter standard that was out during the time. This came out back in I think
2007.
It was 2007.
It was right in the thick of Pixar's like hit after hit after hit.
Yeah.
And this was a Disney animation movie, which is like adjacent. So I feel like it didn't get a lot of credit because it just wasn't a Pixar movie at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it gets kind of lumped in with like the Chicken Littles and Bolt and
right.
Horton Hears a Who kind of things. Whereas I would lump it in with Toy Story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's tremendously underrated.
Why do you think it's underrated?
I think some of the things. Well, I was thinking about this the other day, and I don't know how accurate this is, but I mean, I think a lot of the reasons you guys just mentioned are accurate in terms of why it wasn't an initial success. But as I was going back, watching it again the other day, I was thinking there is some stuff in here that isn't quite as 2019. I mean, in terms of it's almost an entirely white cast. I think the lady who runs the orphanage, is the only one. In the first 5 or 6 minutes, they make fun of someone with a peanut allergy. And then the catalyst for the whole thing is a woman, who's obviously chosen to have her baby, but then is giving it up. So I, part of me kind of, I'm generally not that big of a conspiracy theorist, but part of me does kind of wonder if, it's not really ever going to get promoted that much for some of those reasons. But I mean, I think the initial lack of widespread appeal was just kind of goes to what you guys were saying. But I think maybe some of that other stuff would come into play where it's hard for me to imagine it ever really suddenly catching on or getting some kind of push.
I got an additional theory about that as well, which no disrespect to the cast, but if you go all the way back to like 2001, when Shrek came out, I think that was one of the first major animation films that transitioned from like seasoned voice actors to celebrities.
That's a good point.
And this movie, no disrespect to Tom Selleck or
Angela Bassett.
In the cast. And Angela Bassett too, the lady at the orphanage. It's not a star-studded cast, and if you look at its contemporaries, like during that season of Pixar, you had maybe The Incredibles or Finding Nemo. I don't know if WALL-E had come out there. Oh yeah, WALL-E wasn't particularly vocal of a film, but you're in that season of Pixar, which are 3 of my favorite Pixar films out of all of them. So it's I think comparing that and also just not having a lot of advertising appeal in terms of star power, which is a shame because we already talked about it's an excellent film, but I feel like that's probably an additional aspect.
That's a really good point that I hadn't thought of. But yeah, I did go back through the other day because I was thinking about the voices, and obviously, like you said, Tom Selleck is a running joke in it. But I was thinking like is there anybody else that I know in that film? And so I went on IMDb and looked through, and it was like, maybe I kind of recognize one of these names from something else, but yeah, there's really just no one. So that's a good point, because you think about everything that, just about everything that comes out now that's a big, Pixar film or anything like that. There's numerous, names attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and not and not just for the sake of their names, but for the sake of the quality of their work.
True.
I think it took something like taking someone like Tom Hanks and just using his voice. I think there was something really dynamic about that. This great actor, confining him to just acting through his voice.
Mm-hmm.
I think it could, I think if you tried to just put a bunch of famous people in there, you could, I don't know if that would fix it, but the fact that they got these quality, like really good voice actors to do it. And these guys, I mean, thinking through the movie, the acting wasn't the voice acting wasn't phenomenal. I have to say, there's nothing that stands out. None of the lines, I don't know, like maybe you guys can think through it, but none of the lines were delivered in a way that I was like, wow. There's nothing memorable said other than like what the actual text was, like what the actual the meaning was. I don't remember any of the moments. Do you? These little moments?
Stephen would.
No, I would agree with Judah there, but I don't see that necessarily as a detriment to the quality. If anything, it's kind of like a sports team. Like, instead of like one of these super teams where they're just dominated by their superstars and they carry everybody else, it's more like a team of average individuals who, when they work together, rise above the circumstance. I think I don't particularly recall any individual character like shining out. Like, I think maybe Joan Cusack was. I think she was one of the actresses in it. She stood out a little bit to me because she might have been the quirkiest of all the quirky people for me. But overall, if anything, I didn't really see much standing out in terms of any individual characters, which I kind of appreciated for this movie because I ended up paying more attention to the story as a result. And so I wasn't distracted, which is funny because we were talking about IMDb. I was reading over that earlier. Apparently, Jim Carrey was almost cast as the villain in this movie.
I can see that whole, just like the physical appearance of the villain. It is very like Jim Carrey physical comedy,
and he had to choose between that and that horror movie that he did, the number 23. Yeah. And so he ended up, choosing the latter. And so I could see, actually, that might have been a blessing in disguise. I don't know. But I think the lack of standouts actually served the impact of the story a little bit more in this situation. I don't know if that would always be the case in every movie, but for this one, I think it worked.
For me, I think it helps in the experience of the story, but the impact actually, like, when I look back, I've seen it a million times. I look back, there is nothing that, like, other than the feelings. I'm a much more feeling type person. So you guys tell me, but when I look back at the movie, nothing stands out that's like, wow, that's what made it awesome.
Are you still talking in terms of the voices or just the whole thing?
The whole thing, really.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm not on the page with that. Go ahead, Jared. Sorry.
Right. Yeah. I mean, to me, it's it's kind of, I guess, the impact of, those, well, it's the story as a whole, but, going from at the beginning of the movie, Lewis says, I think he's had like 124 interviews. And so he's been rejected 124 times, and he's just done. He's just given up on life, and he's sort of retreating because his goal is to then try to find his birth mother, who he assumes must want him. So it's going from that to, this journey of coming around to the notion of his future self of keep moving forward, and just kind of that story, juxtaposed with his buddy Goob, which he was sort of partially responsible for, Goob's downhill slide. Although, like, Goob was, apparently pretty fragile to go from, being kept up late at night and dropping a ball to becoming a super villain, based off of, Lewis keeping him up at night.
Yeah.
But there's just so much that I love in that message of how your approach to life, and just not giving up versus giving up and just letting, that resentment and bitterness take hold, that I love about it. And the, the villain, I think what I love most, or what stands out to me the most, are the future versions of themselves, their conversations with the young versions of themselves, because old, Goob, bowler hat man, he has he runs into his younger self in the orphanage, and gosh, I wish I had that handy, but because I don't remember exactly what he said as well, but it's basically just like, I remember he says, don't let it go, just let it fester, let it, let it drive you. And, and then at the end where, Lewis meets Cornelius, he he shows him his lab, and, shows him all these things. And he tells him he asks him which invention, or asks him if he knows which invention he's most proud of. And so he's looking at all of these ones, and it's almost kind of like sort of, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, where you have all these other people like looking for the Holy Grail, and they're looking for the most elegant one or whatever. And it ends up just being this modest little cup. And so the invention he's most proud of turns out to be, I guess, the one that originally kind of kicked things off in the show, and this one that failed. And so it's just that whole idea of like using your failures, not being afraid of failure, and just, using it to move forward.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think it's a study in inventing, right? Like, I think whoever wrote this had a good idea. It was had probably tried to invent things, or, has an inventor's spirit, because there is something and there's something about like being a creator, being creative, and being an inventor, where I think like Ford and I were talking about a little bit this morning, where you have to, there's the like, a plane doesn't just take off. There's the runway, and there's so many little things that gets to the final thing, that the magnum opus. There are so many iterations. There's so many trials and errors that come before somebody. I mean, from what I'm told, I've never had a magnum opus that I can think of, but I have had like a painting or something like that. But just thinking about like an invention, and Edison, and Edison trying so many things that didn't work, and that kind of thing, there's something beautiful about the story of, the keep moving forward through even these like these times where you feel like a failure, where you don't feel seen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's and I think that message is in, in one form or another in a lot of, Disney movies, or now that Marvel's part of their thing. But it's just phrased in different ways. And so I think those are a lot of times the messages that resonate most with me, where, Captain America, is, I can do this all day, and the whole whatever it takes, and this, that, and the other. And then into the Spider-Verse, the Peter who gets killed initially in Into the Spider-Verse, I think he says, I'm the guy who keeps getting up,
Mm-hmm.
and so yeah, that message is just something that just I just love it. I'll take it all day.
Yeah, and it's a very Disney concept. I mean, if you look at the the last frame of the film is a larger quote, that attributes the
Hmm.
keep moving forward message, which is how they progress, like whether it's animation or the parks or whatever. It's like they keep wanting to try new things and create new things. And I know maybe it's not in vogue to praise the big corporate giant that owns all the other entertainment things, but I mean, they started at some point as well, and that drive and that ethic, to move forward, it's helpful for them to impart that into the art that they make.
Mm.
Um, as well. And so I think they kind of low key tried to attribute, or maybe not low key. It's pretty obvious. At the end, low key, attribute the "keep moving forward" quote to Walt Disney.
Mm.
In that.
Oh, I did find where I did write down part of Future Goob, the Boiler Hat Man's quote, where his exact quote is, "Don't let it go. Let it fester and boil inside you. Let hate be your ally."
Hate be your ally. Mm. Well, so let's get a little deeper into the plot. And spoiler, if you haven't seen the movie and you're listening and you haven't seen it, so it's been a little while since I've seen it. I didn't go back and rewatch it. I wanted to kind of get your guys' take. It's about a young boy who's in an orphanage, has this little friend, and he's trying to get back to his mother, right? You mentioned that earlier, that he believes that if he makes the right invention, he'll get noticed and his mother will be proud of him and come take him back.
And it's even deeper than that. Like Jared mentioned, he was keeping a tally of how many failed adoption interviews he had, which was in the triple digits. And like in talking with that, when he was at his wit's end with the lady at the orphanage. Sorry, I just watched it again last night, so it's still
That's
fresh.
good. This is what I wanted.
And he's convinced that his birth mother is the only person who ever wanted him.
Which is funny because it's the only one that didn't want him. I mean, or left him.
And real quick, as an aside, one thing I really appreciate the movie about is they never explore why it actually happened.
Right.
Like they just offer up, and in that moment too, like maybe she's been trying to find me and she doesn't know. And Angela Bassett's performance actually was really, really nuanced for that kind of an issue, because that's a sensitive thing to talk about, especially even in a kids movie. And it's just that you have to understand, I'm sure she did what she thought was best for you in that situation. And to which he receives that as, well, maybe her situation is better now and she's been trying to find me and she doesn't know how to find me, so I need to go find her. And so he takes that drive, and that's what propels his ethic to invent something to find her.
Yeah, and then the thing and it's not that he hopes that he'll invent a great invention and that she'll notice him. It's that he's invented this invention that will allow you to go back into your brain and pull out or project on screen any memory that's in your brain. So he wants to use it on himself at the science fair in order to go back, and because he saw her, of course, as a baby, to go back and pull from his brain what she looks like. And then that's how he can find her, he thinks.
Let's see. And okay. And so help me remember, the guy comes back. He comes. Okay, good.
Yeah. So from there, then, when he goes to the science fair, this kid shows up. This kid about his age shows up and tells him, ask him if he's seen this guy, this bowler hat guy or whatever. And what we come to find out later is that the kid and the tall guy in the hat and the hat is actually a robot. They're all from the future. They've come back in time. And what you eventually find out is that that the kid who came back in time is actually Lewis, our protagonist's son in the future. And the time machine, his son left the garage open. And so the tall guy, the bowler hat guy, has come back in time to try to ruin Lewis's future, because he feels like Lewis ruined his future when he was at the orphanage with him, keeping him up late at night, and basically caused his life to spiral.
Yeah. And so his son's name is Wilbur, right? The guy who comes back to keep Bowler Hat Guy from destroying everything, right? Because of his mistake. Wilbur made a mistake, left the door open. Bowler Hat dude takes the car, comes back to rectify things or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Comes to get revenge, and of course, if he gets revenge on Lewis, then Lewis will have never created his family,
right?
Either.
Yeah, so it's got a little bit of Back to the Future in it, to where Wilbur actually disappears at one point towards the end because the future has been changed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember seeing a lot of Back to the Future. Like there's also, so when he takes him to the future.
Right.
Yeah. Which looks a lot like Tomorrowland.
Right. Yeah. Which is based off of Epcot Center. It was actually Disney's his vision for, like, he wanted Epcot Center to be the model for all of society. He wanted his utopia.
Food's really expensive in his utopia. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, and so help me remember though, why did Wilbur take him to the future?
Go ahead, Jared.
There's a second well, actually now I'm blanking out myself. I started to say it was to fix the time machine, but no, the time machine wasn't broken.
Time machine breaks once they get to the
time machine breaks once they get there. Wasn't the original reason that he took him to the future so that because Lewis had given up or something, or because he told him that he wasn't going to?
Because Lewis was really fixated once he had a time machine. Once he found out Wilbur had a time machine, he wanted to go back and see his mom.
Yeah.
And instead, I think Wilbur takes him to the future to show him, like, hey, like, things turn out okay or something. I'm not sure.
Doesn't he promise him at some point? Yeah, I'll take you to see your mom, but you have to help me.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think maybe he has to go to the future to fix the fact that he left the door open or something, right? I don't know. There's some complication there.
Yeah, it was a progression of events where, like, Wilbur's trying to convince him that he's got to go back and fix his machine, and because the robotic hat messes it up. And so the robotic hat messes it up. And so Lewis is basically then like giving up on inventing or whatever. And so Wilbur's trying to tell him, like, no, you've got to do this in order to, for this, because, well, I don't remember exactly how specific he gets with him, but basically he's telling him he's got to do this for the future. And then in order to prove that to him, he shows him he's got the time machine, but then Lewis is like, well, but if you got a time machine, you can just take me back to see my mom. And so then that was after he had taken him to the future to show him that. And then they struggle over it and crash. So then it becomes about fixing the time machine so that they can go back, get him back to his future. So yeah, it's kind of this, progression of events.
And then spoiler alert, it turns out that the hat is actually orchestrating all this using the bowler hat man Goob. He's controlling him, right?
Yeah, the hat was a failed invention of Lewis's, who he discarded once he realized it was like sentient and had like evil intentions, I guess.
Right.
Or it was too dangerous. And so he discarded it, but the hat, had enough AI to be resentful about that.
Right.
And he latched on. So he latched on to the hat. He or she latched on to it.
Yeah, it's a she, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I think I do remember.
Doris. Yeah.
Doris. Yes.
Doris latches on to Goob and preys on his insecurity. And
it's almost like the Venom symbiote. It latches on to this rival of Lewis and corrupts him and uses his hatred. So yeah, the hat is sort of like an advanced form of the Venom symbiote.
Really is interesting. Yeah, because it does have, and it has all kinds of functions where the symbiote can projectile things. The hat does too. It has all kinds of little arms that come out and things
Yeah.
that yeah.
Like it was
Yeah.
originally designed to give haircuts, I think, which is why they had all like
Oh.
this stuff. And,
Well, it was called the helping hat, wasn't it? And so I think maybe it was almost like yeah, it was like a combination of stuff, but just kind of like a little yeah, I guess it's a combination of stuff. Maybe maybe haircuts I think was one of the functions, but
So for me, where when I think about the movie, and where I've constantly when I watched it so many times with my kids, where I tend to get bored and don't really connect with is really his family in the future.
I agree with that. I dip out a little bit on that. I think that's, to me, that's the weak point of the movie.
I almost wish they'd kept it a little bit more of a mystery because, but I don't know. What do you think, Steven? Because it does seem like they have to. It's like filler where they have to keep the movie going, the plot going a little bit, and introduce new characters.
right.
But it diverts a little bit from the main story.
Yeah, you have to. Well, you have to establish who they are, so when it happens in the end, you recognize who they are. And at the same time, you don't have the luxury of exposing who they really are and having them relate to Lewis because that ruins the surprise at the end. So that's and it is super quirky. Like it's like a Wes Anderson meets Pee Wee's Playhouse kind of thing going on.
Yeah.
It's but I took it in short bursts though. It was like almost little skits of family member to family member. It was weird enough that I didn't feel like it stayed there too long. Actually, one of my favorite non-sentimental parts of the movie is in not that scene, but it's when Goob and the bowler hat show up and he starts like executing his evil plan, but he's like the worst planner in the history of villainy. So like every time he tries to get him, like every mind controlled being that he takes advantage of to try to get the boy keeps questioning his planning abilities. He's just like, it's just that like he mind controls one of the frogs and he's like, it's just that he's a kid and I'm a frog and every single person always ends up saying, I just don't think you planned this out all the way through, like almost talking like a Christopher Walken impersonation. It's really funny. Even a dinosaur does it at one point. It's really funny.
Yeah, that was something I was going to bring up because that is my favorite, I think, joke from the movie is the frog and the dinosaur, both like,
Hello? Cliffhanger. Am I?
Yeah. I don't know. He's real frozen now. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
All right.
We'll never know. The frog and the.
Well, they both have little arms. I don't know if he was going to say that, but that was the thing that always made me laugh was the T-Rex who would say, well, the thing is just I have this big head and little arms, so it's really hard for me to try to like pick him up because of my arm length. Anyway, but all the exasperation on behalf of the bowler hat was pretty entertaining.
Well, let's see. I'm going to eject him, see if he can come back.
All right.
Do you incommunicado with him?
I got nothing so far. Hold on, but let me open up and see where we're at. I don't actually have another tab open, so.
You guys got that song stuck in my head.
It's a good song. It's so good. Let's see if he responds. So, how are your kids, man?
Doing all right. Well, that's one thing I was going to bring up. Maybe this is a good time talking since since we got you here. So the whole you've adopted kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
And adoption was something that that came up huge in this movie, and that's why, like I brought up at the beginning, Mary Lee said this is like a great example of like a movie to show to kids who have been adopted. What did your kids have any like reaction, or did you have any reaction watching this movie with, about kids being adopted, with your kids who, be adopted?
Well, I think, for me, my kids, I will say, by the way, Jared says you might need to repost the link because he's trying to join back in, but it says he's not allowed.
Uh-oh.
While you're doing that, though, I guess I'll riff on this for a second. So yeah, when we obviously we weren't married yet when we saw it for the first time, but it was really impactful there. But and our kids, they certainly love the film, and I think they're more comfortable with, I think, than with the idea of adoption and stuff in movies. I suppose.
Okay.
In terms of I think that ending is really special. Like even after the first time I saw it, there's that moment at the very end when he revisits the science fair and finds out that so much of who became his family was right there in the room with him. And you find out why that's his favorite invention, because that's when he met his whole family.
Yeah.
And he turns around and they have this shot of everybody standing together over the course of the gym, and the music is about to cue up, so they get you there. But one kid, one of the adults who's the judges, says, "You know what, kid? I think you've got a bright future ahead of you."
Mm-hmm.
He already knows that he does, and he just nods and he's like, "Yeah, I know." And that's the moment that gets me every time, is that he's realized, he's already seen what lies ahead, and he's finally actually it's actually become real for him in that moment, that he's not only got what he's wanted, but he's gotten way more than he ever thought he was going to get.
Yeah.
And I can say that as, I don't want to speak for my kids, but I think there are elements of that in their life, and it's certainly in mine and my wife's. Like, we've gotten blessed beyond what we thought we'd be getting in life, in that area of life. And so from that to the end of the film, where you just see him like leave the orphanage with them, and then they buy the observatory, as a house for them, and you realize, that's where he just starts working feverishly away on his, and like that was the last little kickstart that he needed to never give up ever again. And I don't know, this is really awesome. And I really love, I do love the way the film handles adoption, because it handles multiple sides of it, in the sense of him wrestling with not finding a family in the beginning, him having questions about his birth mother, and two, a really heartbreaking but kind of interesting, I don't know how to describe it, but so, Wilbur does agree to his promise at the end, and he takes him back to the past, to the night that his mother left him, and he's going to reach up to touch her and talk to her, and then he decides not to. That he just allows things to lay as they were. And, they don't come right out in your face, and he doesn't explain. All right, he's back.
Oh,
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, we've got storms in the area, and so my power flickered, but it knocked out the Wi-Fi, so, and then I couldn't rejoin.
Okay. Well, here you are. So Steven's talking about the moment where Wilbur took him back to see his mom, and he was going to reach out and touch her, but he decided not to. Keep going with that, Steven.
Yeah, and I appreciate the fact that they didn't even really, they could have so easily just on the nose gotten in your face and told you why he decided not to do it. But it really, I think this movie does a good job with such sensitivity around adoption and stuff, that they don't offer explanations when they're not entirely necessary, because there could be multiple reasons for why something is the way it is. Which, the way I take that is, he now knows that he has a family who wants, and that goes back to the very beginning. He just wanted somebody to want him, and it was important that the Angela Bassett, told him, like, there could have been a very good reason why your mother did what she did. Maybe she knew there was someone who could care for you better than her. Or maybe she just wasn't ready, or any of these reasons. And so keeping that in his mind and knowing that what he has left waiting for him, he decides not to engage that. And it's his decision too. And I think that's actually, that's neat that they did that scene where they took him back, and like he was able to make that choice.
Yeah.
Whether or not to pursue that or open up that can of worms, or to just let it go. And I think that was probably the real keep moving forward moment for him.
Yeah. And yeah, let me apologize in advance if I dip out again. We got storms like rumbling off in the distance, but I didn't think it was close enough to affect the power, but maybe it, I don't know, hit a, line off in the distance. So if I duck out again, yeah, it's, I like, then at the beginning of if you go back, you can hear in the original scene where she's, putting him down at the orphanage doorstep, you hear the same like foot slip, as he does when he goes up there to touch her, and then he changes his mind and he nearly slips and falls. So, so that was, I guess originally, if time is a loop, now we're getting into like Avengers Endgame time theories here, but he was always there making that decision. But, yeah, no, I thought that was, great. And he does say, cause Wilbur asks him like, after all that, like, why didn't you touch her? Why didn't you, make contact with her? And so he just, kind of, looks at him for a second and says, because I already have a family, and so, I think too, like, it's not only just knowing that, this is me reading in a little bit, but it's not only just knowing that he's got his own, family and people that are going to adopt him and things like that. But like now suddenly he's got some responsibility for, if he changes course, then, Wilbur's probably never going to exist. So I took it as that being part of it too. Like, I've got a responsibility here too. So.
Interesting. Yeah. It'd almost be like perpetuating. Well, he would, the negative things that he might have ascribed to his mother, he would be responsible for if he, I don't know necessarily though. I mean, if he met his mom, like, I don't know, was he going to try to convince her not to leave the baby version of him?
I wonder too, like, I mean, and we can maybe assume this since he was a smart kid, is that there's a whole Pandora's box there of even introducing himself to her. Like, he's got, I know, he's got this idea in his mind, this probably elevated idea of who she is. And if he meets her, which, let's be honest, probably the most desperate night of her life, who she's not going to recognize him as a grown kid.
Right.
Like, what, could he inadvertently dash the very notion that he always held of her? And maybe he wants to keep that the way it is too. I don't know.
Yeah. And so that brings up the problem for me is, so the butterfly effect. I think if he had talked to her, that would have caused the butterfly effect. It would have ruined his future. But I also think the whole thing could have, like him going back and knowing you. So Stephen, you talked about how cool it was that he kind of like had that, like, oh, I know everything's going to turn out okay. But couldn't the knowledge of that also ruin his future?
Well,
go ahead, Jared.
Well, I was just going to say that's, this is one of the things that I wrote down to talk about in terms of like, I don't think it does, because again, if you go back to that very first scene in the movie, you hear the foot slip. You hear his foot slip and then her turn around and look, and then that's where she rushes and puts the baby down. And so I think this is one of these like time loops that like, this is the way, it's like Terminator, John Connor being his own, the guy that he sends back being, Kyle Reese being his father. Like, wait, well, how did you come about originally if you had to send him back and you didn't exist? But so I think it's one of those things. But so I don't really have a problem with that. What's interesting to me is like they kind of like take this two-pronged approach with Goob's future, because in the future you see Goob kind of just like kind of slinks away and you don't really know what happens to him. And so you're that's kind of left open-ended. But then in the past, he goes back and to the baseball game and yells at Goob to wake up, and he catches the ball. And then you see Goob get adopted. And so it's kind of like they're trying to have it both ways, where like Lewis's future is still going to play out the same, but Goob's future is going to be altered. So it is kind of interesting. But I mean, in terms of like time travel stuff, I think we're just to a point where, especially fresh off the heels of seeing Avengers Endgame, it's just like everybody can just make up their own rules. There's a Max Landis. If Steven knows, I know who Max Landis is, but Max Landis, you know who he is too. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So when he did his the death of Superman video, he's got this little bit in at the end where he says something to the effect of, my dad always asked me, how do you kill a vampire? And I'm like, okay, stake through the heart, silver crosses, holy water. And so the dad is like, no, you kill a vampire any effing way you want, because vampires don't effing exist. So it's kind of like that with time travel too, where it's like, you can make up whatever rules you want,
That's hilarious. I literally used that exact same quote yesterday, Jared.
Did you really?
Yes,
No way.
I did. In a professional meeting. I cleaned it up a little bit, of course.
Nice.
But yeah, no, I think, there's room to make the argument. They're trying to have it both ways in that situation, but I just always kind of see it as he had this experience of going into the future and learning things. So he's trying to not only ensure the future that's been promised to him, but also learn from his mistakes, because he also has a moment, which again, time travel, make up your own rules or whatever. He looks the bowler hat in the face and says, I'm never going to invent you. Yeah. And it disappears.
Right.
So, he's already changed things in that regard. Right.
Yeah.
And, Goobs seems to be on a different path. And I see them as him just kind of, that's obviously a Lewis-centric story. So like he's trying to right his wrongs after he's learned them. And then as far as all the good things that came for him, I see that coming all the way back to that moment where he meets right when he meets his son. He's ready to quit. And his desire to keep moving forward, to press on with curiosity and invention and stuff, is really the catalyst for what brings him the family that he has. Because all those people were at the science fair. He's apparently, a really important inventor in the future, responsible for a lot of stuff, both good and bad, apparently, for that moment. And then, so for him to give up on that would also rob him of his family and of his future. And so I think seeing that kind of gives him the reinforcement he needs to keep trying. And he has that moment with himself, which talk about time travel stuff there, but where he just explains to him, look at all that we did here, and showing him that was my favorite thing. And like, it's cool to think about that in the concept of the whole movie, in the context of the whole movie, that would be his favorite invention, because that was the thing that brought him everything he ever really wanted.
Right.
Which was his family, not his stuff.
But I love that. I think the problem I have is keep moving forward, to me, resonates because of faith. You keep moving forward because you believe that it's going to get better. You believe in whatever you're moving forward into or towards. So But the problem with faith when you already know what's going to happen, uh, I just think so. So I think about like what you talked about, Stephen, about like how your kids, like, things got better for them,
Right.
and your wife went through such hard times to help them, to be, to make that happen, right?
Yeah. Right.
To like, imagine if, and so there was an aspect of believing in God and faith in God, but to me there's the magic of faith is that you don't know it's going to happen that way, right? Like you believe in it, you keep moving forward even though you're not sure. And I feel like once the problem with, like, I just wish they had wiped his memory at the end or something, because the problem with knowing everything's going to be okay is it introduces a whole new factor of maybe laziness, maybe, maybe he gets a little, what is the word when you let things go because you just
Complacent.
complacence. Yeah, it adds a little complacence, maybe not. But what do you
Well,
get?
I'll say this in terms of faith, Judah. I mean, like, and I mean, anybody who's watching this, could be ascribed to a different one, but the faith that we've had in common also already knows the end,
That's
right?
what that's one of the things I was going to say. Yeah. Yeah.
So if we already know the end now. Now I will give you this because, um, Jared mentioned Spider-Verse earlier, which is like stuck, close to the front of my mind right now too. And they talk about how the hero's journey, like, you just don't know, like, it's you don't take these steps forward because you know that everything's going to be okay. You do it. It's a leap of faith, right? And it's a hard thing to really articulate, at least for me, how it can kind of be both. Because yeah, the things that my family went through, I wouldn't say I knew that they necessarily that they would have the life that they're having right now, right? But I knew in the end everything would be good. That it would be the way that it should have been. That um, we would be made. We would be ultimately transformed into the people we were, more transformed towards the people we've been intended to be by going through this, because we knew we felt and believed very deeply that this was a journey we were tasked with undertaking, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and in doing that, I said yes to those things. The rationale I always had whenever we had a hard time was, I truly don't believe we would have been asked to do this if it wasn't going to work out.
Mm-hmm.
And that if our children had endured everything they've endured so long, a foreign government is not going to come in the last minute and wreck it all to pieces. It certainly felt on some days like I was wrong, right? But ultimately it wasn't. And not and everyone's story doesn't end like mine. And I'm not going to sit there and pretend like this is, just that God works that way. That, like, if you just believe enough, that you get what you want, But it's in these situations. Sorry, I'm riffing so much. I'm starting to lose my own track, my own state of mind here. But I think knowing the beauty of faith is that driving force, that knowing ultimately things will be okay one day, things will be made right. And whether you get to see that or not is another discussion. And what role you play in that coming to fruition is another discussion. But I think on some level for Lewis, like in the movie, like that serves as a catalyst for him to keep going.
Well, and one thing I'll say is he has this discussion with his future self where Lewis says, "So if I go back now, this will be my future." And so Tom Selleck / Cornelius, his future self, says, "Well, that all depends on you. You have to make the right choices and keep moving forward." So they do address that kind of your concern about, well, what if he gets complacent? And so he does tell them, like, no, you've still got to make the right choices and keep moving forward. but yeah, to Stephen's point, that was there. I had 2 points, and that was the other one I was going to make, was like people of faith basically kind of have sort of a same attitude without having, actually seen it in the way Lewis had. But people of faith, and it can be for, good purposes, or it can turn into a negative of believing that they know the end, and I mean, that's regardless of faith. When 9/11 hijackers fly planes into buildings, it's because they believe that, after they're going to be vaporized and then, wake up in paradise. And so I get your criticism on that. But I think they do kind of address that in the movie. And yeah, I think there is a real like connection to faith there, which is kind of its other, would be another tangent of mine about how a lot of times I kind of wish people were less certain of what they believe. Like, I don't want to take anybody's faith away from them, but to me, I think the people that I have the most friction with and some of the most destructive things I see are because people are just so certain of their faith that that it ends up, becoming this hammer that they take out into the world. Like, well, I know this is true, and so this is, we've got to, I've got to, run your life and remake the world in my image on this. So I wish people were a little less certain, but that's a separate like side tangent.
Well, see, I would disagree with you guys. I believe that that's not faith. If you've seen it, it is not faith. So if he saw it, faith is belief in things unseen. So if he saw it, he's not having faith. He's going through the motions, like he's working towards something. If you already know, if you've already seen it, and I think seen is the key idea here. Not just that it's going to happen, because knowing, you never know. Nobody knows, right? But if you've seen it, then you've already experienced it, and you're just going through the motions, right? So there could be an aspect of his humanity that it's like, oh, it's been there, done that. Let's try something else. Like I would be tempted to say, I've had thought experiments. What if I had married this person instead? What would my kids look like? And now he can actually, like, he's making decisions,
But yeah, I mean, like Jared said, though, like, is it really not faith? But when he's still tasked with having to make that journey, though, like the future that he sees is contingent on him making the right choices, and that's not the movie we get to watch, but he still is, he still has to walk that path. And, walking that path is, I mean, I think about, the journey that, we just got out of a year ago. Like, yeah, if I'd known everything was going to turn out okay, I probably would have helped us sleep a little bit better at night at times, that there are advantages to that. But at the same time, a lot of those decisions, some decisions really hard to make. You still have to make the right ones. And that could have impacted, some of our decisions could have. And I don't know if I'd necessarily say that we always made the right decision. Some of the decisions we probably could have made sooner. Some yeses could have been no's, some no's could have been yeses, and who knows? Maybe we would have shaved off several months off of things. I don't know, but I think knowing the end, I think there's still an element of faith because I think even seeing the end, there's still a little bit of belief involved because you're not there yet to know that it's still coming.
Yeah, I mean, I get your point here, Judah. I mean, I agree with it in the sense that I think anytime you introduce time travel, past or future, it's sort of a little bit of a cheat. I mean, just again going back to Avengers, Endgame, like going back in time to bring back half the universe's population. I mean, there are stories that you can make the case that stories are more impactful if you don't have the cheat of being able to alter past events, or in this case he didn't really alter past events but be able to see the future. So it's not a direct comparison to faith, but I think my point and Stephen's point was just that that faith is very similar to it in a way, because or at least from the people I know, because, growing up in the Bible Belt, people that are just so completely certain that regardless of what happens in life, it's going to be, even though they don't know the exact picture of it, eternal happiness with, their Savior and the people they care about. I mean, just completely certain of that. So that's kind of was the parallel I was drawing.
I would say, though, that I think the people that have the most certainty or certitude are the ones that the ones that portray that they have the most certainty or take action based, that in a way that looks like they have no certainty, are probably the ones that are the most worried about it.
I'd probably agree with that, but they're working to a lot to convince themselves of it. I mean,
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying on that. It's yeah.
And so I think there's like a disconnect for me between, and this is not even about the movie anymore, but like in thinking about faith, like if we really, 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 absolutely, if we'd seen the results of our actions, would we take the same actions? And I don't know. I'd be afraid of my complacency. I'd be afraid that some of my good decisions were made out of fear, and you take away the fear and I don't make the right decisions.
Well, have you ever made habitually wrong decisions, like over and over again? Like you've already seen the results once and yet you do it again? I mean, I have.
We all do. Yeah.
So I guess like sometimes the result doesn't have the impact on the next decision like we think it does.
Yeah, I think a lot. I'm sorry, I thought you were done. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, I treat this person poorly or I act unkindly to this person, and I've hurt them, and knowing that I've hurt them hurts me. And like the next opportunity I have to do that, I'm like, whatever, I'm doing it again. I'm still going to say that thing that I wish I hadn't said last time or whatever. And before I know it, I'm like, oh, well, okay. So I mean, I do see what you mean, Judah, and I think there's credence to that. I mean, if you already know you're going to get what you want out of life, I mean, just look at. I'm assuming people who have been born into better privilege than me probably would be less motivated to work as hard, knowing they're just going to get what they want out of life. And so I think there is an element that there's truth to that. But at the same time, faith can motivate people as well as as well as drive them to complacency. And I would argue that if someone's being driven to complacency, they might not have the best understanding of their faith in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of like what will motivate you to get somewhere, or what could derail you or cause you to be complacent. I think mostly it goes back to what are the things that drive people in life. I was thinking about this in a different context the other day. I was thinking about somebody, and like they're just going to keep making that decision over and over because that's not what they really get this emotional high from. And so I think with Lewis, I mean, what does he really want more than anything else? Or what really drives him in life? And so inventing drives him. And, having a family and being loved and accepted drives him. And so I think when you start talking about people like the pillars, or whatever's a good pillars isn't really a good metaphor for driving people, but like the engines or whatever that really drive people. I think those wouldn't necessarily really change for him. I get your point more about complacency, but I don't think like, because those are the things that he wants so badly, and what's been really kind of created in his formative years. Now we're really like getting away from a little animated movie into some deeper psychology here, but because those are the things that have, that's been sort of the emotional wound created in his formative years. I think, that's, it's not gonna, like, he's not gonna get complacent to and fall off, that drive to get to that place that he's seen.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said about what you about the prayer. Keep moving forward. The prayer that he keeps coming back to, and there is life is more than just faith is more than just expectation. It's also faith is acting in it and doing these little things like praying, like keep moving forward, having these things that remind you, like scripture, I think can help do that, is remind you, like, not only of trying to reach a certain goal in the future, but this is like just having things that like rules and processes that we submit to just because it helps us get through today,
right,
regardless of what we're trying to accomplish in our future or trying to get to in our future.
Yeah.
All in all, though, the movie, I mean, as you can see, gets us thinking about these deeper issues in a good way.
Yeah. I think there's a lot to mine from it. It kind of saddens me when there's something that I really like that I think like, oh, that's really good. You can get a lot of stuff out of it that, I don't know, that doesn't get like broader appeal. I think there's like there's sort of like a good, like there's a sweet spot for that. Cause I mean, part of the reason I think that Game of Thrones kind of went off the rails at the end is because they started like writing too much to like the large commercial audience, so I don't know, maybe I shouldn't complain too much about that, but I like when something gets enough recognition that I can have, conversations with more people about it,
Mm-hmm. Stephen, can you, for the purposes of people that don't know the whole story, can you give a short synopsis of what we've been talking about as far as your story, man?
Yeah. Okay. So, at the beginning of this discussion, I said that my wife and I had gone to see this movie while we were dating. We both decided, before we got married, that adoption was a way that we wanted to grow our family, and we chose to do that first. So, over the course of about 7 years, six years maybe, we have adopted four children from Uganda, three of which are biologically related, and they all got here out of order. That's a deeper conversation. But the last two, who are our oldest, it took 3 years from the beginning of our pursuit of bringing them into our family to them coming home. And that last year, Allison and I spent on two separate continents. Um, just because of changing laws and our government and the foreign government all being kind of unhelpful. So there was a whole lot of ups and downs on that, and so as of we've been all home and under the same roof for about 13 months now.
Nice.
And life is awesome. My kids are my 15. I have a 15-year-old now. Which came a whole lot faster than I thought it was going to, who spent her first year in American public school and was on honor roll. I'm sorry, I'm getting into dad brag mode now, but I just want to say that I have a son who's a track star now, and all four of my black kids love ice hockey. It's really weird.
Whoa, interesting.
Right? They can all. Dude, I was able to get them in on the Marvel movies and stuff. So they're all neck deep in the MCU and stuff. But it's been really amusing to see how everyone's finding their identity here and getting to be a part of that, and how they, how loving them has shaped me as well as the other way around. So it's been really cool. And
Nice.
Well, and just a quick point to that. I mean, not that this is anywhere near that level, but going back to the eccentricities of the Robinson family, I mean, that's part of the appeal for Lewis is that he doesn't think, he's going to ever be able to find a family because he himself is so eccentric, and it takes finding the right eccentric parents, and then I think you can just see little like snippets of that in everybody's story, and just some of the things you were talking about there about the idea of assembling this family sort of as you said out of order, and your Ugandan children loving hockey, and just little great little bits like that.
Yeah, no, we certainly have our quirks in this house. We haven't gotten down to like meatball fights yet, but it's been really, man. I mean, guys, I wouldn't have been able to write this future. That's why I tell my wife all the time. I was like, never. This was way better than anything I could have come up with. So it's been pretty amazing.
Wow,
and continues to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and just to tidy things up, when you got cut off, Jared, you're talking about the dinosaur and the frog.
Oh, the dinosaur and the frog. Yeah, no, I liked that same joke that Stephen was talking about, where the hat, and Goob come up with these plans, and even like the most simple-minded little creatures are like sitting there thinking it through, and they're like, yeah, I'm just not sure that this plan was very well thought out. So it's just like another, running gag where the giant dinosaur is saying like word for word what the little frog was saying, and just then seeing the frustrated reaction of them. So yeah, that was my favorite joke from the movie.
And my second favorite joke, we talked about the Tom Selleck gag, is when Wilbur takes Lewis to the future, and he has this super fast montage of describing everyone in the family. He's like, "Well, your dad, what does he look like?" And obviously, he looks just like Lewis, right?
Yeah.
And he goes, "He looks like Tom Selleck."
Yeah, right.
Whatever.
So they go from.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, like they have the montage that Steven's talking about, and I think they do it as like a series of like portraits of each family member hanging on the wall, and so they're all animated, and you're just going through one after the other of these animated photos, and then all of a sudden, then it's like a real photo of Tom Selleck, and so it's funny.
So is good. That you said it's an ongoing joke? Is there other places where?
Well, the big gag is that Tom Selleck is the voice of the father.
Right.
No, I get that, but did they have other little? Is that the only?
It's really just throwaway lines, I think, and it's not. There's not a whole lot of them, but that's the first one, and the payoff is that Tom Selleck is the voice of the adult version.
Right. It's not. And another reason it may not have really gotten as much widespread appeal is that when I think about it, like it's not the funniest. I mean, it's not like a Toy Story or Up to me in terms of like the number of jokes and gags and stuff like that. It's really not. It's a fairly serious movie a lot of the way through it. So
pretty straightforward adventure.
Yeah.
Well, coming out of this, what I'm really taking away, this is the portion of the podcast where we just kind of think, well, what does this mean for us? And I think what I'm taking away, I really enjoyed our discussion of faith, and I am taking away the aspect, the idea that we can know our future. We can be excited about something in our future, and just kind of live our life, even not getting dogmatic about it, not getting dogmatic about what we believe our future is going to be, because like you said, we still have to make the choices that get us there.
Mm-hmm.
I like that idea. I like that idea of faith being something that doesn't necessarily it isn't something that directs all of our actions, in as much as it's sort of like it is the impetus. It is it's a motivator behind our actions. right?
Yeah.
Like it's not something that I don't think it's something that we have to like be dogmatically. I don't know. What do you guys think? I don't. It shouldn't be something our faith shouldn't be something that's like dogmatically, specifically informing every action, but rather the spirit of what we believe in. You know, maybe I don't know. I'm getting into some weird territory here.
Hey, Judah, are you
Yeah.
familiar with a guy named Bob Goff?
I don't know.
He's an author. He's a speaker. He's apparently at some point, I don't know if he currently still is, was the American consul to Uganda,
Oh, okay.
which is obviously how we learned about him. But Allison turned me on to this an audiobook version of a book he did called Love Does. And it's very much about like letting he's not maybe the most seasoned, he's not a theologian, right? He's just a good guy, I think, who's reasonably well versed in faith. And he what I'm getting from it, I haven't finished it so far though, is just that like it's your faith and even your understanding of what may be to come is a lot like what you were saying earlier. Like it shouldn't be a motivator for you to sit back and rest on your laurels, but instead, you let that motivate you. I'm going to sidetrack here for a second. Penn Jillette, one time, who I believe is a pretty noted atheist. I saw a video of him one time where like a Gideon gave him a Bible after one of his shows, and he was doing one of these like webcam vlogs talking about it, and he was very respectful about the man and stuff. But also very dismissive, of course, of what he believed. But he says, I have to wonder, he's like, if you really believed, and this man seemed very fervent about what he believed and stuff and seemed very genuine. He says, if you really believe what you believe, wouldn't you want, surely if you believed everything you said believe was true, you wouldn't want to keep that away from anybody. And I don't necessarily mean in the sort of street corner screaming at people kind of approaches, or the Facebook debates, or the I'm going to share a meme and that's my version of, standing up for my faith or something, or claiming I'm being persecuted when I live in America, but whatever. I think there's got to be some level of motivation to put that faith into action. And I think that looks more like how you relate to people necessarily than debating people, like loving people, bringing people into your home, bringing the strangers, or people you might typically just ignore, like into your circle of interaction even. And I think there's something to be said about, if you know what's to come, you do have to make those decisions to further refine who you are. And I would say, if that is based in some sort of faith belief, then you would want that faith to inform how you treat people, and how you interact with people.
But if you really believe it, it's not going to be at the forefront of your mind, right? Like you're going to act out of it without knowing.
Right. It's going to be like imbued into your DNA.
Yeah. Like I believe this chair is going to hold me. I don't come into the room thinking that chair is going to hold me. That chair is going to hold, like I just sit in it. Our action.
Right. And I think in that regard, it's like this, what I believe, like this helps shape who I am. Right. So that means if I see someone in need out on the street, they're like, I'm not just going to keep walking and avoid eye contact, because that's not the kind of person that I am. Does that make more sense? I guess. I don't know. And I know, like, listen, there's realistic parameters on that, because we're all individuals here, and we're not superheroes who never tire and never sleep, but and don't have families of our own to be responsible for. But I think there is room for that in every person's life. Probably looks different from person to person. I mean, like, keep moving forward it's going to mean something different to Goob than it does to Lewis. And so, but it's still something that should be explored.
Yeah, I think for me, it's like the keep moving forward is not just like I love the simplicity of the message too. Just like keep moving forward, or in Into the Spider-Verse, I'm the guy that keeps getting up. I admire the perseverance of it, and the just putting one step in front of the other. But I also love, going back to what you were talking about, Judah, with inventing. I love the taking the specific sort of inventor's approach to it too, where it's specifically more about embracing your failures, learning from your mistakes and failures, kind of looking at that as if something failed, examining why did it fail? If I was this just a happenstance, if I tried it again, would it work? Or is this something that needs to be tweaked? And kind of moving forward that way with sort of this analytical approach to life. And I think I'm probably kind of a little bit of a cross between Lewis and Goob, in that I do keep moving forward. I do try to analyze mistakes and failures and embrace them as kind of crossing off a possibility and moving forward. But I think part of it too is using, hopefully in a healthier way than Goob, bad experiences or slights or whatever as fuel to that too, which maybe on in small doses is okay. But but I do love that specific sort of specific inventor's approach to keep moving forward.
All right. Well, good, guys. Thank you. That was a good conversation, and I hope you guys got as much out of it as I did. That was it's good. But we're gonna have to end here, and I realized, Stephen, do you know our what you're supposed to say?
I think I have one. I have one in the chamber just in case.
Okay.
Just in case I need to. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
I can't promise it'll measure up, but
hey, we never know what Jared's gonna say. So
I'm gonna since we're doing Meet the Robinsons, I'm gonna stick with that one for this one at least. So
okay.
I'm just gonna throw out a Switchfoot lyric and hope it sticks. So we'll be all right.
Well, guys, get out there. There is a lot to build.
Keep moving forward.
Love alone is worth the fight.